This is Public Sector Voices with Daniel Gibson. Today we're joined by Councillor Graham Carr-Jones from Dorset Council. Graham discusses how the coronavirus has spread up the action on the homelessness crisis and how Dorset Council have endeavoured to get people into temporary and permanent accommodation over the past few months, something that got them nominated for our Council of the Month award.
Good morning, my name's Graham Carr-Jones. I'm a Dorset councillor. I'm also the Cabinet member, portfolio holder for housing, community safety and emergency planning.
So what made you actually pursue a career in local government? What made you want to get into being a councillor?
Oh, goodness gracious, that's the old question. I didn't think quick enough to say no when I was asked to stand. I think I went in completely not knowing anything 16, 17 years ago. Our local council, we were two-member ward here, and one of the members decided not to stand, and I think I was the last-minute choice for the other Conservative member, and he said, "Would I stand?" I said, "Well, why not?" And the rest of the success history, and it's been. I mean, I've really enjoyed my time in local government. I never intended to be on the council, let alone I never intended to end up as the leader of the council, which I did before North Dorset District Council went unitary. But I say it's not for everybody, but I really enjoy it.
What did you do before that? I know you mentioned then that you kind of you must have been involved or had an interest in local government to even be pushed into the role. So what did you actually do before?
Well, I mean, my wife and I have been running for 35 years a sports memorabilia business. And
right.
During that time, when we had the tragedy of 9/11, we were working a lot in America and we lost a lot of business, and I had a lot of staff, and I decided to downsize the business and converting our then workshops into small dwellings for local people. And I guess that's how I was almost dragged into it, and that the interest started from that sort of planning application stage, and knowing that I wanted to rent the properties that we built to local people that had more of a need rather than just taking on that market view.
There's been a big push from Dorset Council around getting people into housing, whether it be temporary or permanent. So what's made that push come around?
Well, obviously during the beginning of the COVID crisis, and the government's telling all councils, to get everybody in off the streets, I think that was really, really challenging for our team. And the housing team's only a small team, and they worked tirelessly 7 days a week against all the odds. And I'm so proud of the work that they did, especially when they were coming under fire locally from certain people that were unhappy about the use of temporary accommodation, the use of hotels for B&B and stuff like that. And we could have spread them out more, had more people stepped up to the plate. But of course, the smaller B&Bs and hotels seemed to close, and they took the sort of government payout. The larger hotels furloughed some of their staff, or they took in the NHS staff or blue light services, and our homeless and our rough sleeper community were left in 4 hotels across the district. And that was, was challenging for them and challenging for other residents. It wasn't an ideal situation, but COVID-19 didn't leave anyone in an ideal situation. It hit us like a freight train, and it was really, really quite difficult for a lot of council employees, for our staff, for members, trying to get used to a new way of working as well.
Well, I think, like you've just said, you've sort of just touched on it then, that it seems like Dorset Council have recognised that homelessness is a symptom rather than the problem itself. So how important is it to give not just a home, but also to give that little bit of support as well to people when they've been given temporary or permanent accommodation by the council?
It's absolutely crucial. It's absolutely crucial to the success, because it's, as you say, it's not just pop someone in a place and say, hey, our fella, get on with it, because there are a lot of people that have got far more complex needs and they need that support system around them. They may be living a chaotic lifestyle. They'll have possibly alcohol and drug dependency, and this is a disease that needs to be recognized. And I might sound like a big old softy, but actually it's about treating people with dignity and helping them find their own self and their own self-worth, because everybody was somebody before they failed, if that's the right vernacular. It probably isn't, but before maybe society failed them. I mean, there's a lot of ex-forces people out on the streets suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. There are many reasons that people become homeless, and it's just and really differentiating between homeless people and rough sleepers is another thing that I've asked my members to really take on board, because they are two different cohorts, both of whom need the help of our council.
There's been a lot of pressure from on central government, really. A lot of people pushing out on central government to do something about this homelessness crisis that we're having at the minute. So why do you think it's so important for local authorities to address the problem as well?
Well, I think social problems start with housing or lack of it. And I think that if we can in some small way start that ball rolling of getting people into secured accommodation, it helps them. If you feel secure in your accommodation, you're more confident. You can get a job, you can work, you can better yourself and not feel I suppose invaluable, I guess. And that's really important for people to have a sense of worth. And housing, for me, is the start of that process. I mean, if you haven't got somewhere to call home, you go and get a job and tell someone, oh, well, I'm of no fixed abode. It's tragic. And in this modern world, there should be no need for homelessness. I mean, there are people, I understand, that actually prefer to live on the street or outside. They don't want to live with other people. So there are many reasons for homelessness. It's not just rough sleepers. People lost their homes during this crisis. Good people like paramedics were asked to leave their digs because people were frightened they were going to bring disease back to their homes. And we saw such a huge increase, numbers like we'd never experienced. And that's why I'm so proud of the team for how they stepped up to the plate and dealt with that. And they didn't complain, they just got on with it. And I'm really proud of them for that.
Well, I think, like you've just said, you've sort of just touched on it then, that it seems like Dorset Council have recognised that homelessness is a symptom rather than the problem itself. So how important is it to give not just a home, but also to give that little bit of support as well to people when they've been given temporary or permanent accommodation by the council?
It's absolutely crucial. It's absolutely crucial to the success, because it's, as you say, it's not just pop someone in a place and say, hey, our fella, get on with it, because there are a lot of people that have got far more complex needs and they need that support system around them. They may be living a chaotic lifestyle. They'll have possibly alcohol and drug dependency, and this is a disease that needs to be recognized. And I might sound like a big old softy, but actually it's about treating people with dignity and helping them find their own self and their own self-worth, because everybody was somebody before they failed, if that's the right vernacular. It probably isn't, but before maybe society failed them. I mean, there's a lot of ex-forces people out on the streets suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. There are many, many reasons that people become homeless, and it's just and really differentiating between homeless people and rough sleepers is another thing that I've asked my members to really take on board, because they are two different cohorts, both of whom need the help of our council.
Well, when you say you sound like a big softie, I think in times like this, we sort of, the world needs more softies, more people that are going to take people in, going to look after them.
Well, I think there's nothing wrong in caring, is there? I mean, no one's going to argue. No one's going to argue that. What I think that I have managed to do with the help of my housing team is to bring to the forefront of with my cabinet colleagues and members on the council the absolute need to address this problem. And what I was really most delighted about recently, that cabinet approved about 4.78 million for buying temporary accommodation, and we were also awarded another 625,000 odd from MHCLG towards buying temporary accommodation, which means we're now looking at purchasing one-bed properties across Dorset Council area, so that we don't have to house everyone out of their area necessarily. I mean, unfortunately, one of our large coastal towns, Weymouth, it has a huge amount of bed and breakfasts and hotels, far more than, say, the rural areas. So one's almost using that area, but you're having to send people sometimes out of area, which is not ideal.
What challenges the council faced in terms of it? Is there anything particularly that sort of the little hurdles that maybe you have to get across to tackle a crisis like this?
I think that the team, obviously, they acted with absolute professionalism, to their credit. They did, and they came under a lot of fire from certain quarters within the industry, that because of course when we're all on lockdown and suddenly there's no one on the streets other than perhaps the homeless cohorts that are not obeying the rules, because councils weren't given the power to enforce people to stay in their homes. They just relied on people's goodwill. Now, some of our more chaotic residents, they wouldn't play by the rules, and it was really frustrating for those that were, because they were so obvious. They're out there. I mean, everyone who's in their front rooms or their living rooms on the seafront, you can see, there's a group of people there that maybe they're drinking and they're doing things that ordinarily one wouldn't be doing on the street. And I think that was a real challenge for everybody, because there are people saying, well, why aren't they behaving? Why aren't they doing what they're, and why aren't we being more draconian with them? But actually, the council didn't have that power. But there were some real successes, and I think that it's very easy to focus on the negative, and I'm one that is much more inclined to focus on the positives that have come out of this. But because that positives don't sell headlines, and that's really the challenge, because you're up against a newspaper that's got dwindling sales, therefore wants to sensationalize stories, make people want to make things out to be worse than they are. I mean, and I've no doubt that there were real difficulties for some people, but actually it's the positives that came out of that I'm focusing on.
It seems like COVID obviously is a very negative thing. People have lost their lives and been ill, and we've not been able to see our families. But are there any silver linings to this? Like, is there something that we can look back and go, actually, well, maybe it was a terrible time, but there are positives that have come out of it?
Well, I think that for me, certainly getting cabinet support for capital funding was a huge plus. Dorset Council became a registered social landlord during this time, so we've now got the ability to move forward and get more property and to up our portfolio of properties for people that need temporary accommodation. I mean, I've no desire for Dorset Council to be competing with our registered social landlords. We work really well with them on housing projects, and they've got a much bigger pot of money than we have, should I say, for doing developments. But I think what we want to do is to fill that void in temporary accommodation that perhaps private landlords aren't filling and the market isn't providing. So that's a success. I think one of the other things that I was so pleased to hear, that we had a project of rough sleepers that were sleeping on a bus, and they had to move out of the bus project into one of the hotels. Well, one of the guys took it upon himself to make himself really helpful amongst the hotel, helping, fixing up things, just generally being a useful person rather than just sitting in his room cogitating. And so much so that when the night porter quit the job at the hotel, he was offered that job, and he's taken that, and now he's completely free of alcohol, and he's got himself a secure job that's come with accommodation. So I think that's a real bonus. I've had other cohorts that have taken it upon themselves to use the time of COVID to stop drinking or get themselves clean. And again, it's those stories that really, you know, lift your heart, because it's such a difficult place to be if you've got those dependencies, and none of us that can imagine how it must be to live like that unless we've experienced it. And that, you know, I take my hat off to these guys that have used the time to make positive changes in their lives.
Yeah, I think it's those little victories that kind of get you through, like hearing little stories like that. That's just made me really smile. I know you can't see me over a podcast, but genuinely, it's just nice little things that kind of come from a crisis, and people just, again, he didn't have to be, he could have just sat in his room, like you say, but he was helpful, nice, and managed to secure himself a job afterwards. So that's a really lovely story to hear. Moving on slightly though, I heard you mention before about you were the previous leader of a council until it was made into a unitary. There's been like a lot of debate about it, and obviously they're trying to get more councils to do that, so we have fewer councils. There's been a bit of pushback from one side, and then the other side kind of pushing back against that. So I wondered what your view is on unitary councils, and are they for everybody? Are they ones that work in some areas and not in others? What's your experience of that?
I think I came from a point years ago that I thought districts were districts and counties were counties, and ne'er the twain should meet. However, I was the former leader of North Dorset District Council, and we worked together collaboratively with two other councils, and we shared a chief executive, and we saw the benefits of being a larger sort of super district, if you like, though we never called ourselves that. And so there's the natural progression towards unitary, and there'll be the arguments that you lose the democratic voice, but actually it's down, I believe, down to those elected members to be the conduit between their parish councils and the unitary council. It's really, really important that members step up and actually do the job that they're elected to do. I am an advocate now for unitary. I think it's a better way forward. It makes sense financially. It makes sense from a planning point of view. I mean, we're only a very young unitary council, probably 18, 19 months old. So we haven't been going long, and there are things that take longer to sort out. And it's not all a panacea, but we need to, all local authorities need to make savings. It makes sense to have one planning authority as opposed to sort of 6 different ones from the districts. So it makes sense, but it needs to be done collaboratively, and you need to bring people on board, and even those that don't want to be part of that journey. I think ultimately they will reap the benefits. I think there's strength in a larger authority.
So do you think it's something that should be put across the country then, not just a case of sort of opt in or opt out? This is what's happening, we're having these many councils and that's it now.
I think that it's something that eventually all districts and county councils will come to, and borough councils, because actually, with the squeeze on finances, it's a natural progression. And as I say, there'll be some people be dragged into it kicking and screaming. Others will embrace it, but it's worth the pain. I think for local authorities, they need to modernise, be more flight of foot. I think that it's a natural progression. As I say, in the very beginning, I was completely anti the idea. But I think now I wouldn't go back. One
of the main arguments for it is just the savings that you're likely to make. How much has that actually affected Dorset Council? How much of a saving has it made, and what knock-on effects has that had?
Well, I think we initially instantly saved 10 million. I will say that COVID has halted some of the transformational work that we were doing. It's kind of put us back a few months, but we're back on track now to getting those sort of transformation programs on train. And I think that there is always savings to be made. It is the argument generally seems to be for not doing it is about democratic representation. Now, I believe that, we went down from 180 odd councillors, I can't remember the actual number, across Dorset, to 82. Now, if you've got 82 people grafting, it's better than having 130 or 140 where you're carrying some people that maybe aren't so keen to do it. And I think that's the argument, is about the number of members. And I can't say that we've missed those members that we don't have anymore across the districts. I think that we're working collaboratively. We work cross-party. It's not a conflict. I don't think. I haven't seen conflict amongst our members in the new unitary. Many of us were former district councillors, former county councillors, dual hatters, triple hatters, and so you can't keep a good councillor down.
Well, I think that kind of wraps everything up from my point of view. Is there anything that you'd like to say to add on the end? Any final thoughts?
No, but I have really enjoyed doing this podcast with you. I really thought I was gonna loathe it, and it's been good fun. It's been quite cathartic as well. And I hope that those that listen gain something out of it.
If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Next week, we're joined by Lahari Ramouni, a researcher for Centre for Cities, where we discuss what can be done to get the high streets back up.